Just confirming that we're online and live now. Okay, so yay. Okay, guys, so welcome to the Defold conference, previously known as DEFCON, which is apparently a hacker conference in the US somewhere. So to avoid any confusion, we're calling it DefoldCon now. So welcome to the stream. And I'm just double checking here that people on the stream seem to be able to follow along. So let's get going then. We have a fairly full agenda today. Previously announced on the website. So I'm going to start off with the state of Defold presentation, going into the brief history of Defold, what happened last year, the state of Defold as it is today, and some exciting news. Then we're going to hand over to Marius. He's going to talk about how we ended up using AI in a game about AI. Sounds exciting. Then Artyom will talk about how to build games using Scene 3D in Defold. Then we'll hand over to Konstantin to present the making of Plague Lords. And then we're gonna send the control all the way to Australia to David to present on the Blender sync tool. And then we'll wrap up the evening with an open Q&A with the Defold team. So let's get going. And please ask questions during their presentations. Just ask them in the stream and we'll try to pick everything up. I'll get help from Alexei and Matthias to catch any question. All right, so let's talk about Defold. So I'm going to start by presenting a very brief history of Defold as a timeline like this. As most of you know, Defold was created a long time ago now, in 2009 by two guys working at Avalanche, Christian and Ragnar. And they created Defold in their spare time, made it into an independent company and an independent game engine. And then it was discovered by King in 2013 and then acquired by King in 2014. And that's when I started working with the Defold at King, and then soon after Matthias joined and we ramped up the team, and in 2016 we made Defold available to anyone at GDC. So it wasn't an internal product anymore used only at King, but it was freely available with all the services for everyone to use. And what happened then is quite remarkable. We didn't really push for any marketing or anything, but like organically, people started picking it up. And Alexei, who's on the stream here, he was one of the really early users. And a lot of cool games were released. And what we saw was like a big increase in external users, still used internally at King, but at the point in early 2020 or late 2019, we made the decision to actually move Defold to become an independent game engine without any affiliation with King. So we actually, King created the Defold Foundation, gave Defold away to the foundation with source code and all of the rights. And that's how we've operated ever since. So what happened in 2020 was that King gave away the trademark for Defold, a bag of money so we could get started, and the source code. And then it was hands off. The foundation is in many ways as a normal company, but has some rules and limitations. It's registered here in Sweden, in Stockholm. And the objective of the foundation is to maintain and develop Defold, ensure that it's always free and free for everyone to use, and the source code should always be available as well. But since we actually moved from King, we also had to make some drastic changes. We had a big team working. Now that we were like basically in startup mode again, we had to scale down the team, and it initially ended up with just going from a graph of here you can see how many employees we had working, and at one point we had like almost 20 people working on Defold, and then in 2020 when we moved to the Defold Foundation, we had to scale everything down again, and we came back to only 2 developers. It was me and Matthias, two guys that worked with Defold for a long time, and then in 2021 Alexei joined and started working as well. So we were basically back to where we started. We had these great years with a lot of developers working on the product and really building a solid product, and then going back to some kind of startup mode again with a small team working on the core of the product. And we obviously did this not on our own, but with a group of great external partners. Since we're not owned by any company anymore, we entered into various corporate partnerships with Melsoft Drive, Heroic Labs. We received grants and donations, and we also received community donations from you guys, basically. So that's what keeps us going, like the funds we got from King and the funding we get from our corporate partners and from the community. So a big change from what it was, but it's been an exciting couple of years here working on Defold independently. So that's a bit of history. So most of you have probably already seen the blog post and about the roadmap of last year. But I thought I'd do a quick recap of just showing like the roadmap versus reality, because it never really aligns. You know, you have plans and then things change. But let's go through it very quickly and briefly. So usually when we plan development, we split up the roadmap into a couple of different main categories, being platforms. So everything focused on the various platforms that Defold runs on, the extensions, which is an important and integral part of Defold nowadays. We always focus on stability and performance, keeping the engine small, behaving well on all kinds of devices, and then obviously also on new features. So just quickly diving in here. So we had a focus on Android and iOS last year, and we delivered quite a few things. Some things got left out. For extensions, we also managed to hit most of our targets. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to move the physics into separate extensions, and we almost entirely moved Spine to an extension by the end of the year. And now, as probably you all know, Spine is fully in an extension as well. On stability and performance, we managed to hit some of our targets at least. We didn't get to the culling and the variable refresh rate, and we had some plans for optimizations of draw calls for sprites. We missed those targets as well, but at least got some improvements on stability and performance. And we had some great plans for new features, but we missed most of our targets. For various reasons. I'll go into them soon. Annoying and a bit disappointing, but as I said, this is roadmap versus reality, and things change over the course of a year. And unfortunately, some of the things had to be put aside for other tasks. So we basically hit half of our targets. Good or bad, I don't know, but that's what happened. And we got a question from Richard on the forum as part of this conference, and he asked how are issues selected to be worked on for individual releases, and he also commented on the fact that for the roadmap we missed a lot of our targets, and he's obviously completely correct, and we saw by the numbers there that we missed a lot. But what we always have to do is to balance between our vision of the product, actual real-time things happening over the course of a year. It could be disruptive things happening for some platform like iOS or Android. It's not uncommon to get thrown a curveball. And there's also the partners I mentioned. So last year, Rive joined as a partner, and they've been funding not only development of the Rive integration, but also a lot of groundwork that made it possible for us to move Spine to an extension. And we're super grateful for that support, but it also took a lot of time. It paid the bills, but we had to set aside things from the roadmap to work on Rive instead. And that's usually what happens during a year. We work closely with Melsoft. They're another corporate partner. They have their requirements. Usually things align with our own roadmap, but sometimes we need to reprioritize, and that's why things get left out. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is for us. We have to reprioritize to keep the product running and keep users and partners happy. And when it comes to just releases, we do monthly releases, as you know, and we try to hit the balance between like partner requests, things that have popped up recently on GitHub or in the forum, and also things from the roadmap, and to some extent also what the community has voted for with like the thumbs up emoji on GitHub. So we try to balance it, but what usually happens, we don't have like a super scientific process for this, but it's mostly that like the more recent issues that are popping up get more priority than things that have been left for a long while. It's maybe not the best way to work, but it has served us fairly well over the years, and we try to hit that balance at least to some extent. So that's how we basically pick things for the releases. And okay, so let's look ahead. What's in store for this year? And we've already, worked through one quarter, and some exciting things are shipping or have already been shipped, like the Spine extension, as I mentioned, that's been fully released now. It's gone through a lot of testing. Thank you to all users that have helped out. But what we also have done recently is actually to pick up on a few of the things that were left over from last year with the first version of calling implemented. So currently supporting sprite calling, and that's actually the top rated community vote on GitHub. So there we've really picked a feature that's been requested for a long time. And we've also just recently in the beta that's coming out in a week, we have fixes for variable refresh rate and high refresh rate screens. And with that, we've also managed to decouple physics updates to keep those reliable, even though you have like variable refresh rate or high refresh rate on your screen. So that's a couple of examples of things that actually has shipped now, and that's been requested and been problematic for a long time. We also got another question from Alex. So if we have a contingency plan in place for future disruptions, and that could be lack of funding or loss of key staff, and as Alex says, sure, the engine is open, the source code is available, but it's also hard and unrealistic to expect the community to just pick up if we would leave the product as it stands right now. It could obviously live on by just community contributions, but that's a bit unrealistic. So to answer your question, yes, we have a contingency plan. We are currently fairly well funded, so there's no immediate risk of running out of money. And me, Matthias, and some of the other team members, we're we have our own company working for the foundation, and it's our passion and it's our job, and that's what pays our bills. So there's no risk of us just leaving at the moment. So you can be safe in the knowledge that the Defold is here to stay. And to continue, I'd also like to say that, yes, we really have a plan to make Defold viable in the long run, because we are growing. And we have secured additional funding for Defold, which is super exciting because it means that we can increase the team size fairly significantly in a short period of time. So what you will see in about a month or two is that we will go from 3 engine developers to 4, and we will go from 0 editor developers to 2 editor developers. And that's a big leap and a huge change for the product. And we will not stop there. We have funding to probably onboard 1 or 2 more developers to the team. So we'll go from, we'll double the team size and double the productivity and capacity in the team. So Alex, you don't have to be worried. We will stay and we will continue to deliver really cool things for Defold. And I guess that's it for me. So a quick recap, some explanation of why things went like it did last year, and also some exciting news that I hope will leave you with the knowledge that Defold is here to stay and will continue to live on and even become even better, even faster with a larger team. Cool. So yeah, that's my presentation. I finished almost on time at least. We will collect questions and then answer those at the end. For the other presenters, we will probably pause and collect and ask questions after each presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen here and ask Marius to start sharing. To present on how we ended up using AI in a game about AI.
Hi there. I think you have to let me.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. So we'll see what happens if you give it a try again.
No, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, all participants. Oh, okay. Give it a try again, please.
Yes, it works.
Excellent. All right, over to you, Marius.
Okay. So, right. I'm Marius. I work with Critic Gaming. We're a small game dev company from Bucharest, and we've been working with Defold for the past 5-ish years, I think. Our first game was Interrogation, and we successfully launched that. And now we're working on launching Good Morning AI, which is a visual novel about the protagonist has to teach the AI that will govern Cyberpunk 2064 Amsterdam. So yes, it's a game where you have to teach an AI. So you're gonna have to talk to an AI, and for narrative reasons, we don't have an actual AI, but we've made some. We did some things to make it sort of believable in the world. But I'm here to talk about the tech. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our narrative design system. It's called Fuyore. We used it for interrogation as well, and we've upgraded it for Good Morning AI. It's a domain-specific language where you can sort of write a script of what the characters are supposed to say, do, and any sound effects, animations, and so forth. It's sort of like the choreography of the game. And we looked at some other narrative design things, and they didn't really fit our needs. So first, we obviously needed a way to do all of this, to choreograph. But we also needed it for it to be simple enough so that our writers can use, which most of them are not programmers or not very technical at all. Another need was that it needed to be easy to internationalize, so easy to extract all the texts and index into an internal database. And it needed some very basic logic like branching, checking on stats, checking whether some narrative flags have been set, and so on. And this last one we didn't have for interrogation. The first version of the language didn't have very strict compile time checks, so we would have situations where David would have misspelled the variable somewhere in scene 95 beneath a certain set of if conditions, and no one would notice until someone actually played that part of the game with those conditions. So for this, we decided that we need a way to make sure that people don't make mistakes, because we're people and we make mistakes. So,
Marius, sorry
right.
to interrupt you. There's some people in the stream, they say that your sound is low. I'm not sure if it's possible for you to move closer to the
better?
microphone, or yeah, there's a bit of a delay also.
Is this better?
Oh yeah, it sounds louder here as well. Yeah, if
okay,
yeah,
I'll just talk closer to the mic and.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you, Morris.
So what is Fuyar? It's a language that compiles into Lua. The compiler is written in C, so it can run in a native extension, but it can also run separately. The grammar, we did it with Tricitor, which is the grammar parser from Atom, which was a good idea at the time when we were using Atom, because that way we only wrote the grammar once, and we could also have syntax highlighting for editors like Atom. It transpiles to Lua, and there's a Lua runtime that handles all the commands and the variables, so that we can always inspect what's happening and extend it. The runtime runs on top of our, so crit is our library of things, lots of modules, Lua modules that we've collected over the years, and crit progression is our coroutine library. You can fork, join, and do all sorts of wait on things, stuff like that. So the way it works in game is that we have a bundle script that does all sorts of other things. You can publish to Steam with it, you can package, all sorts of stuff, but for Fuyar it also compiles all the files and bundles them as Lua. So in the final game, in the bundled game, we never use the Fuyar native extension, so we don't need to make sure that works and doesn't crash anywhere else. The same bundle script, you can extract all strings with that script. And we have syntax highlighting plugins for error checking and plugins for editors for syntax highlighting and error checking. So, right, how does the language work? Because I've talked about it and haven't really showed it to you. So it kind of looks like this. Can you see this? I'll just make it a bit bigger. So yes, you can. You have libraries. You can import things. You can write commands. But the most basic and the basic building block of this is that all text statements, where someone would show a text to the player, are written in this very simple script-like format. You just say. The character will say hi. If I misspell the character, it's gonna yell at me. If I misspell a variable, it's gonna yell at me. If I try to set a variable to the wrong type, it's gonna yell at me because this is This all requires declarations, and it's all it's mostly statically typed. So we have this big file where we just list all the enums. We have all sorts of variables, and our writers have to list all of these before they can use them, so they won't make mistakes next time it so happens. And all of this metadata is also very useful for save files, because then you can go in and just have them all here, and I can just change things on the fly because all the variables are handled in the runtime. Right. So, where is my presentation? Right. Very simple. Just some control flow. Some options to change to let the player pick an option, but also powerful enough so that you can make some systems for procedurality and stuff like that. All right, I forgot to show you one kind of cool thing. Say I have the game running, and I have this file in my editor, and I just press a key combination, and it's gonna talk to a server that's running in the game right now. It's gonna send it the file without restarting the server. I can load up a different scene or iterate on a scene, and so on. And this takes me to the voiceover part. So I hope you heard the AI speak. I'm not sure if you can hear this, but all right, there's the things that I wrote. So the AI speaks. We have a game about an AI. What our requirements are that we knew that the AI needed a voice because it's the main core gameplay of the game. You talk to this AI and you teach them. So we knew they needed a voice. We knew it was important, but we also knew that we are a poor game development country from Eastern Europe. So we don't really have the money to voice act all the wonderful lines that our writers wrote for this character. So we figured, well, actually someone said it in the office, what if we use Alexa? Because it's an AI, Alexa is an sort of AI speech. So we went and investigated what it takes to do that, and apparently Amazon has this service. It's called AWS Poly, with which you can just request Alexa or some other of their voices to give you speech. And not only it gives you speech, but it can also give you speech mark data, which means you know exactly at which time each phoneme is spoken or each word is spoken. So we actually use this in the game.
Is it possible to boost the volume of the AI somehow?
It's too low?
Yeah, people in the stream barely hear it. I hear it, but faint.
I think you might be hearing it through my mic, which is a bit... because I don't know how to... I can push this up, but if you speak, it's gonna get looped. Is this somewhat better? Right, so this is what I tried to show you. As the AI speaks, each word comes up at exactly the moment the AI is speaking. So you can also do that. So how did we do that? Well, we parse the text lines as they are spoken, and we parse them using so there's these XML tags. It's called SSML, speech synthesis markup language, where we can cue the AI whether to add a break or speak something with a certain pronunciation. So we use that, but we also use XML-like tags for rich text. So we decided we're gonna strip the SSML tags when we pass it to rich text, and strip the rich text tags when we pass it to Alexa. And then what we did is that we're actually invoking the AWS command line interface in the game using Lua's I think it's os.system, which obviously halts the game for a moment because it runs synchronously, but this is just enough for us for development to figure out how it's gonna sound. Yeah, we cache them, we play them back through fmod, and then we use the speech marks to show the text as it's spoken. Now, this is the first version, but for release we obviously can't ship the AWS CLI with the game. So what we do is that we leverage our build script. So our build script already parses Fuyore and does all of that processing. Actually, let me find a terminal somewhere. Right. So Fuyore, when compiled, it kind of looks like this. It has a big table of initial lines at the beginning, and then it compiles each command to a Lua function call, basically. So we can just search for this fui.txt, and whenever we encounter text being spoken by the AI, we can call into the AWS and extract that. We bundle all of it, and what we also do is something one of our colleagues did, and it's amazing. We figured out that actually, let me we figured out that we have there's this digital audio workstation called Reaper, and Reaper has really good scripting support. So you can actually run Lua in it. So our colleague just made a script that can pass all of these files that we download from AWS through the same effect chain, so that we can make it sound more AI-like, add some glitching, add some reverb, add some vocoder, and generally just make it fun. So we also do that. It's not perfectly integrated into the build system, but it's 2 commands away. Right, that's sort of mostly what I wanted to talk about. I can show you like maybe some stuff that you can do with the build system. So for example, this would just I just ran it this morning to upload the build on Steam. I can export all the initial lines if it works. So if I open one of these files, you're gonna see that all of the text in the game is here. So I don't know, I guess this was it. I'm sorry for not being very organized, but if you have any sort of questions or generally about what we do, what Fuyore can do, what we did with Good Morning AI. I'm here.
Cool. Thank you so much, Marius. We got one question from Astro Chile on the forum, but I guess you covered the question. It was, could you tell me more about your narrative solution for Fuyore? What are some of the key features? And I think you've shown that very well. I'm very impressed by what you've put together, and judging by the responses in the chat, a lot of people are impressed.
Thank you.
Maxime was asking if you're using Lua underscore format to exclude it from editor processing.
Exactly. Actually, not from editor processing, but from Bob's processing. Because the editor has no issue with other Lua files being in the project, but somehow Bob compiles everything it sees .lua, even though it's not being referenced or used.
Yeah, I think that's an optimization on our end that we could solve for you. But
yeah. So what I did is that I have this thing, deploy.lua has this setting of the package path at the beginning that allows it to use underscore Lua.
Cool. Jonas is asking, have the writers wanted some more visual interface, or how was their productivity and experience?
So I was actually super impressed with the writers. So for interrogation, we didn't need that much of Fuyore because we had a different visual interface for the levels. But here, they used this. Let's open an AI one. Where is it? AI pods, morality or mind. I don't know. So this did some pretty amazing things. Like for example, one of the writers wrote this system. He's not a programmer, but he managed to write the system where we have news blurbs, random news blurbs coming in at different moments in the game, just for world building. So he managed to make this big file with lots of ifs that would spew some random news. So yeah, really impressed with how they managed to handle it.
I guess it helps a lot since it's like human readable, I'd say. I mean, it's not very weird syntax at all. So
the main idea was to for it to feel like writing a theater script.
Okay, thank you, Marius. There's currently no more questions in the chat, but maybe if someone has a question, we can collect them and perhaps handle them at the end of the presentations. So I'm gonna just briefly take over here.
Thank you. By the way, the demo of the game is on Steam.
Yeah, don't forget to promote it. Yeah. Okay, so next up is Atsiom. Is going to talk about building games with Scene 3D in Defold. I think a lot of people have been excited by what he's been sharing in the forum and like the live demo. And I guess judging by like the recent months and all of the work that's gone into 3D in Defold in general, I think there's a lot of interest in the community, and we've recognized that as well. So we will take small steps towards making 3D, working with 3D scenes in games more approachable in Defold. But until we do that, there's Scene 3D. Okay, Atsiom, please share your screen when you're ready.
So, yes, hello everyone. And so do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And let's start. My name is Artyom, and I'm going to tell you how we are doing 3D things with the Defold engine, and why we developed Scene 3D, and what tools we use. So, a couple of words about our experience. We are a two-person company, and we make small HTML5 games for web browsers. We have started doing that from time to time since the middle of the Flash era. And at this moment, we're doing that full time. And our primary game development tool is the Defold engine. In this video, you see the gameplay of our best release so far, PuffyCat. And some time ago, we decided that the next game would be a 3D game. Yes. And I'm sure you want to know the reasons. Oh, this catching. And we experimented with 3D for a couple of years. Oh, the video stopped. Okay. We experimented with 3D for a couple of years, but we haven't released any 3D games yet. The video you see is a demo made with Defold. It doesn't use any third-party 3D renderers or libraries. It's made only with the built-in Defold capabilities. But it's sad to say that this project hasn't reached anywhere yet. It turned out that it was too ambitious for us at the time. And next was what you see in this video. It's another experiment, a first-person shooter, and again made with Defold. But while developing this game, we realized that we don't have basic things like a good camera script, basic set of materials, useful scripts, set of visual effects, and so on. I mean, all those things that you can throw into a game and see something useful on your screen. This is the reason why we released Scene 3D a month ago. But before talking about Scene 3D, let's answer the main question. Why Defold? There are many great 3D engines like Unity, Godot, Play Canvas, and so on. And I'm not going to compare all popular game engines, but you remember we developed HTML5 games for web browsers, and at the same time, we don't want to be stuck forever on the web platform. From a personal perspective, Defold is the best choice right now. So let's continue and see what we have in Defold. For 3D, I want to mention a couple of important features. First of all, Defold is actually a 3D engine, not 2D. Please remember that. Defold can import the Kaleido 3D file format with animations. For example, a dancing man on the right is captured from our FPS game prototype. Also, you can specify your own data format and stream it in the mesh component and render anything you want, as we did that in the block building game from the previous slide. And Defold has a great render script, which you can use to define how to render the 3D scene. Actually, you can even make a physically based render with it, yes. And next is Defold has bullet physics built in, so you can do some physical simulations in your game. And Defold has basic universal. Actually, it's very important for 3D development, in my opinion. This file format saves lots of space in your game bundle and reduces GPU memory. And okay, all that is great. And now let's mention some difficulties. Okay. Of course, you will have some difficulties. Now there are not so many examples to start with. That's why you will probably need to know basics of OpenGL and to know GLSL to write some custom shaders. And there are small performance issues like no frustum culling for 3D models and no option to render objects front to back. So you will have to deal with that and wait for the fixes. And there is no asset store with tons of content where you can download everything you can imagine. And what about workflow? Default editor lacks basic features like object alignment, browsing assets with previews, and etc. And yes, it sounds a bit negative, but actually, and overall, all those things are not so scary. I mean that they can be easily solved, and default team follows up the request features and implements them. Thank you very much. That's really great. And the fact is that now Defold has everything you need to make a good 3D game. So now let me introduce you Scene 3D. What is that? Scene 3D is a collection of assets for Defold that we are developing and that we decided to release for the community months ago. It's free to use, it's open source, it's available now to download, and the link will be at the end of the presentation. So what's included in Scene 3D? Scene 3D has an example scene to demonstrate all features it has. And you see the small building blocks like floors, walls with doors, icons like stars, primitives, letters, and so on. Also, it has a basic character controller, and it has car physics. So it's fun to drive around and toy with this example scene. All assets include convex shapes for physical collisions. And I'm not going to speak about all the included content because of the time, and it's better to play this demo scene yourself. Plus, we found that it's useful and very fun to include basic scripts to the collection. What you can do with those scripts? It depends on the type of a game object. In this video, you see that I'm changing properties of the included script to do basic animation of this object and to override collision settings of it. Yes. The point of that is to make prototypes in their coding style. So it's fun. And now our current goals, what to expect next in Scene 3D. Now the included camera system is quite simple. It doesn't support multiple viewports, so you can implement a split screen, and it still doesn't have functions to convert screen to word coordinates and vice versa. Next, I'm working on adding shadow mapping right now. I want to implement it like simple game objects that you will just need to add to your scene to enable shadow mapping, so it will be easy to use. And on the video on the right side, there are fake shadows. There are block shadows that we implemented using plain old 2D sprites. What most important to mention is that we will add everything useful we have to share with all of our developments with the Defold community. I hope that will help developers to jump to 3D development with Defold more easy. So you can expect new basic shaders like dissolve shader, rim light, or some visual effects, and so on. And next week, to be precise, we will add a new example scene to Scene 3D. It will contain car physics again, but with different camera settings, plus a basic AI, plus how to spawn object in the scene, and so on. So you can see in this video how an AI opponent is following the player's car. So this video is fun, I think. And now a couple of words about our current workflow and additional tools that we use. What tool did we use to make all Scene 3D content? The answer is SideFX Houdini. And currently we use Houdini as the main software for 3D modeling. Why Houdini? Houdini, the whole work process resembles description of the 3D geometry as programming an algorithm. I mean that Houdini stores actions as nodes. These nodes then wired into networks to define a recipe of a model or a 3D scene. The main benefit is that is the ability to change anything in your model from the beginning, as you can see in these videos. In Houdini, it's easy to do the procedural generation of content. By the way, Blender has the same feature, you know. It's the name of the feature is geometry nodes, and it gives you almost the same workflow, but I'm not an experienced in it, and I can't compare features of both applications actually. And worth saying, we created tools to export static geometry and convex shapes for physics collisions from Houdini to Defold, and we will release it for the community soon. Yes. So, personally, I think it's a great idea to develop these games with Defold. Yes, it lacks some features, but it's worth trying. And I hope that you will find Scene3D useful. The link to Scene3D is at the bottom of the slide. We're waiting for your feedback. And I would love to see your contributions to Scene3D, of course. And follow me on the Twitter. That's all.
Thank you, Artyom. There's a lot of excitement in the chat. Yeah, people are impressed. So
thank you.
It looks really good. We're super happy to see this kind of development for Defold. Good job, really. We had some questions from previously, so I'll just jump over and let's see what we had. So Astro Chili asked, what about the design of levels in the old-fashioned Quake or Half-Life style? What are the main limitations right now?
I can say that old-fashioned Quake and Half-Life style. So Quake engine uses BSP file format to describe level geometry, and the main limitation, it's hard to say because actually you can use mesh component to stream geometry from BSP file format right into your scene. And actually, I think it will be easy to render Quake or Half-Life style level. And I know there are some great tools like Trench Broom to design those levels. And also the second way to do that is I know that BSP levels, all meshes in these levels actually are convex shapes. So you can split the levels into convex shapes maybe and put right into the default buffers and into mesh and into the physics engine and see what you will get.
That's interesting. So, it sounds like an exercise for someone to try. Cool. Yes. Thank you for that answer. And I believe we had another question. What are the workarounds for putting different textures on different sides of the object, as often happens in such levels?
Workarounds for putting different textures. I think that now you have to design your 3D model in one of the 3D software tools and put the right UV. I don't know what to say. I think that it's quite easy to do.
Perfect. That's a good answer. Yeah, I'm not an expert. I trust you. Cool. Thank you. All right. So the final question, I believe, also related to like these kind of Quake or Doom-like levels. Is there a need to optimize the storage of these textures and models if there will be as many as in the actual levels of the first Half-Life? Oh, yeah, those levels are quite big, I guess.
My point of view, it's a good idea to use some special tools, maybe again inside of Houdini or Blender, to bake all your textures into single large texture to reduce amount of draw calls and to optimize the performance of your game, something like that. So it depends on your game, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. think that's the final question. Let's see. We have one. Okay, no, it's just a comment. Will be easy to group meshes in sectors and use portals to check visibility of such meshes. Okay.
Use portals. So it's a term from BSP file format, as I remember, or from source engine, something like that.
Yeah, cool.
I think it will be easy to do, actually.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Artyom. Well done. I'm excited to follow along with the development and see what you're up to. Also see what kind of game you will be creating. Let's hand over to Konstantin to present the making of Plague Lords. Konstantin is from Red Unit Studios. And Plague Lords was one of the games that took me by surprise. I hadn't heard of the game, and all of a sudden there was a well-polished, good-looking game made with Defold. There's obviously other well-made, polished games made with Defold, but this had flown under my radar, and I hadn't heard of it before. So I was very pleasantly surprised when I saw that it's far along in the development process, and Konstantin will share more about the game and the work they do at Red Unit Studios. So Konstantin, over to you.
Hey, thanks a lot. Hey everybody. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here.
Would you like to share your screen?
Actually, you can turn my picture on. Well,
I think you should be able to click. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Well, sorry, I didn't see anything. So, well, what's happening?
Yeah, there should be a green button saying share screen, I think.
Yeah, I see a share screen, but oh yeah. No, yeah, I see. Okay, yeah. No. Well, I just thought you will show my
yeah, okay, I can if you're not demoing any videos.
Yeah, you can just switch to me.
Okay, so let's do it like this then.
Oh, I thought I should do it. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Oh no, it's confusing here.
Yeah, well,
let's try again.
Well, you can imagine how confusing it was to me.
Let's see. Okay.
Do you get?
Yes, please go ahead, Konstantin. Sorry about the disruption.
No, I'm so sorry. I just. So you can turn on just me talking. Yeah, well, you can do it if you can do it full screen. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to figure it out while you talk.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Well, you see here. Hope it's not reversed for you. Sorry, that's my only slide that I was gonna do some speech about a project. So, no, full screen maybe.
Oh my God! Is there any Zoom experts in the chat?
Oh, I thought that's what Zoom was all about.
Yeah, why can't we get you full screen?
I guess I'm so sorry.
No, it's not your fault. If anyone knows, what we're supposed to do, then please let me know. How can we get you full screen? I have no...
I'm not sure if I can. Oh, sorry. See anything? Guys, I'm so sorry.
Bjorn, just try to stop sharing your screen, then it should be full screen for the speaker.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's on me. Konstantin, please go ahead. I think you'll get like full screen when you start talking.
So is it okay? It's working? Okay. Well, thanks a lot. I'm so sorry again. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. And as Bjorn said, my name is Konstantin, and I'm a CEO and a GUI artist at Red Union Studios. And we are making a game called Plague Lords. You can see it right here. Hope it's not reversed for you, because it's reversed for me. Okay. And of course, we are making a game called Plague Lords, and of course, it's made with the Defold engine. That's why I'm here. And I guess I should start with how we've changed our engine to a default form from the one we used before. And a couple of years ago, we've been working on a board game, on a game called, it actually didn't have a name. It wasn't announced yet, so it was heavily a board game. It was miniatures, tons of cards, like item cards, location cards, complex dice mechanics, and aside from a previous game, Warbands Bushido, that was a PvP game, PvP board game. This one was focused on a single-player experience. So the development got a bit stale. So one of the programmers left. So we decided that we'll start with a gameplay video, mock-up gameplay video. So it was actually a gameplay video that wasn't that we made with we made a few gameplay animations with Flash, and made some sounds and some music, logo, and so on, but it wasn't actual gameplay, and we've sent it to the publishers. Of course, we decided it's a mock-up gameplay. And the demo was quite well received, and we got great reviews from the publishers we sent it to, and then it was obvious that now we will have to make a vertical slice for the game and for this board game. And we all agreed that we definitely needed a lighter engine from than the one we used before. And I guess one of my friends told me about Defold at the moment, and I guess he heard about it on some conference maybe. Hey Alex. So we decided to give it a try, and I guess the first thing we did was we've made an empty project, and it was like a desktop. For the desktop, it was like 5 or 7 megabytes. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. It was 7 megabytes as far as I know, as far as I remember. Well, for us, it was the definition of lighter engine, and later we found out that a lot of its features working right out, all of its features working right out of the box, and all those the most useful things, and that was surprising for us. That was a huge difference from the engine we used before, and now we didn't need any assets with Defold actually, and we used a lot of assets with our previous engine, third-party assets. So I guess we still use only a couple of libraries. Yes, it's D4S and R&D. I guess R&D is kind of redundant for now. We still love those its functions like I don't know, toss and dice and so on. Well, me personally, I've started with assembling GUIs in default assembling interfaces, and the process was quite smooth, and and it was obvious that we actually can make a bigger game, and all the features we've implemented were done quite way ahead of our development pipeline. So, actually, while we were working on that vertical slice, that's when the pandemic has started. And, all the conferences were closing, and all those PAXs, GDC, Gamescom, and we actually had no place to find a publisher. Because right back in the days, it was quite a personal process, personal matter. You had to meet the publisher, have to discuss some things, your future plans, your development plans, and so on and so forth. And it became more and more obvious that we might get no funding we need, or maybe we won't get no funding at all. So. But the good thing here was that we became quite familiar with the engine, with the default engine. So, and it was obvious that we can actually make a game. We can actually make a bigger game than just a vertical slice, something like that. And I've came far beyond from assembling interfaces. We had that idea lying on the shelf waiting for its day, and it was a game. It wasn't actually a game. It was a game concept, an idea of the game called River Lords, and it was a turn-based settlers game, and not only a settlers game. It had some civilization vibes in it, and now we get reviews that the game looks a lot like Age of Empires 2. That is actually really flattering, because it was a game I've spent incredible amount of hours in when I was a kid. We've took that concept of a River Lords game and added some survival elements to it, added some, changed the name to Plague Lords, added some additional building, like crafting, like permadeath features, and all of these things, day and night cycle. And another thing that was important for us, actually, that was the feature that we've built a game around, is that in modern survival games, you are, your party is quite limited to, like, if you take Darkest Dungeon, for example, you have a great pool of characters, and you have like only 4 of them go to the dungeon and do scavenging runs and stuff. And we decided we wanted to make a game where you can take all your woodcutters, I don't know, tailors, all those characters, give them, I don't know, pikes, some basic pikes, forks, and send them to, I don't know, battlefield, to the walls, or whatever there is. So that was the basic idea. And at first we've started with taking a couple of weeks to test some features and things like what if we'll do, what will happen if we'll take 8,000 hexes and with game objects, and how fast will it run, what we will add, what will happen if we'll add some layers to it, some effects, some fog of war, and how fast the map how smooth the map panning will be, and it was surprisingly, everything worked surprisingly well, even on low NPCs. So, and the major feature for us was at the time, right at the start of the pandemic, that we could make the project right at the studio, and we didn't need no additional funding or anything like that. We could do code, and we could do graphics with was almost without any help. So, well, as a result, I guess we are working on Plague Lords for a bit more than a year, and with a team of 2 or 3 developers, mostly artists. And well, the game is like 60 or 70% done. And well, it actually we've changed a lot of stuff, and now it's more a roguelike survival game RPG and then just a strategy. So it has a lot more features that we planned at the start. Well, it actually has incredible amount of features, and all of them are almost done with. And so I guess it will take only, I don't know, half a year to complete the rest of the content. I hope we'll be able to release the game at that time. By the autumn, I guess. Well, and if I told you that we had a lot of experience from working on the first demo, like spending a few months in it, imagine how much experience we got from working working a year on Plague Lords. So after that, we got back to our previous board game, and we've started with. We started it from scratch, and with all the knowledge we got, now we've done some incredible things. Well, it's still a 2D game, but actually now it has a rotating camera. It looks like an modern XCOM games, so it has 4 angles, but it's an incredible product. The first demo, it didn't have that feature. So it was, so the results are really incredible for us now. And well, so we are now getting closer to release, I guess, release our first release in Steam. And so you can always check our Steam page to see more details on the game, and you can check our demo, and if you like it, please add us to your wish list. Thanks a lot. Well, another thing I should add is that, well, me personally as an artist, well, as a more a designer, I have to say that, well, the Defold reminded me a lot of my first coding experience with, as far as I remember, it was Macromedia Flash. So the Defold is quite as, well, it reminded me a lot. So I can do a lot of stuff. And what I wanted to say, if you're an artist and if you are, the Defold is quite perfect for CCG games and board games. That's something we do now, and we can't wait to get back to working on a board game. And if you're an artist, then you should check it out. That's it. Well, I guess, yeah, check out game, add it to your wish list if you like it. Yeah, well, that's it. Thanks a lot. Mostly our experience with Defold.
Thank you so much, Konstantin, for sharing your story with Plague Lords and with Defold. It's very encouraging to hear that, and really impressive as well. There's a question in the chat. So I've never made anything big with Defold. How hard is it to structure the project to add and maintain new features and mechanics? So I guess that's a question for you, and I guess Marius can jump in as well. You've had experience releasing a large game, but please go ahead, Konstantin.
Well, for me, it's structured incredibly well. Well, plus, I can describe my favorite feature is, and as I said, and I should, it's important thing that, as I said, all the features we add are way ahead of our development plan. So one of my favorite features is tables. I guess it's not surprising for him. I haven't seen it anywhere, and I've checked a while ago. I've checked, did some research on Unreal Engine, and that was crushing news that there was no anything like tables. So the idea about tables is well, if somebody doesn't know it, it's incredibly flexible, not even an array. It's a database, and it's incredibly fast and incredibly flexible. So we had. We were working on, we scheduled a week for making a save game. Save game feature, where the player can save his progress. So of course he can't. It's a survival game, so we save it for him. And we had a week scheduled for save games, and we've made it like in a couple of hours. Because we had a huge table of data, we had a huge map, and we had a huge table of characters, quests, and all this stuff. So we've just saved them. That's it. And we had, I don't know, a few hours, a day for parsing the data, for preparing data for correct and compact save. But that's it. We've we had some more time planned for it, but we've made it in a day, maybe even less. So that's it. That's the answer about structure. Yeah, how well it's structured.
If I'm to pitch in on this, I think what's awesome with Defold is that you can decouple things very easily. Like you just drag, something doesn't work, or you want to test something without a certain part of the game, you just remove that script from the collection. You want to add something, you can do that with message passing very easily without affecting anything else in your script. We have this dispatcher system, which is basically a pub subsystem. So all the scripts can dispatch messages to it, and some other scripts can subscribe to some messages. And that way we managed to basically decouple anything from anything, so it's super easy to just add a new feature independently of something else.
Excellent, guys. Thank you so much for answering the question. I think that's it. I don't see any other questions in the chat related to Konstantin's presentation. Let's move ahead then and jump to, we're going to Australia. I'm just gonna find my slides here. Let's see. So am I cursed right now? It seems like I'm unable to. Jesus Christ. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. So yeah, as I said, we're going to all the way to Australia now to David Lannon. Are you still awake, David?
Yeah, still here.
Yeah. What time is it now? Is it like first?
It's actually getting quite reasonable now. It's 6 o'clock, so it's all
okay. Have you had your morning coffee yet?
Oh yeah. I think I need another one, but yeah.
All right. So David, I guess a lot of you have followed his progress on the forum with his flight sim and also his impressive work with a sync tool between Blender and Defold. So David is going to tell us a bit more about that. Over to you, David.
Cool. Let me just grab the screen. So does everybody see this? Fantastic. Okay, so just a very quick rundown on why I even actually started using an exporter tool was to actually try and make the transition from and the 3D editing tool to a default scene much easier. It was the aim wasn't to sort of supplant the idea of exporting from tools to default. The idea was just to make my life easier. So I wasn't trying to solve everybody's problem. I was trying to solve mine. And so I'll quickly run through what I've built, how it actually works. I'll do a very quick installation process because I don't know if people are very familiar with Defold, with Blender. I'm not a Blender expert. I'm certainly not an artist. I'm more of a software engineer. That's my background. So I'll basically run through how the export tool works, and we'll do a few demonstrations and how they actually end up in the scene. And yeah, then we can do some questions and answers, I guess, to talk about that. So this is how it ends up in Defold. I'll jump to Blender. This is where we start from, of course. I needed an F18 with a nice little animation of the wheels coming up and down. Please excuse my my artistry here, because this is all my own hand-generated art. Essentially, what I wanted is something, a very simple panel where I could actually put in a bunch of data and synchronize that data directly to Defold. Now, it's technically an exporter, but it's not really, because it actually does a fair bit more than actually just export data. You can actually synchronize metadata and you can add all sorts of different things, but we'll run through just how to set it up. So if you haven't used Blender before, jump into add-ons and scroll down to, I'll just remove the one that we've already got in there. So it's now gone. So what you'll do if you're a first-time user of the sync tool is click on the install, jump down to where you've got it installed. Oh, here we go. I've got to find it now. This is going to be a bit sad. The latest build is pretty much always checked into this particular folder inside the GitHub. The GitHub information is all on the forums if you go searching for it. So we'll enable the sync tool. You should see the sync tool. You should see a version number. I try to make sure that gets maintained regularly so that you know what version you're actually working with. Once that's enabled, you should now have a panel along the side here. So these are the traditional panels. Make sure you're in object view to see it. If you go into a different type of view, so if we go into, say, edit mode, you'll notice that the default tool disappears. So if we pop back into object mode, look at the default. There's a bunch of parameters. I won't go through every single parameter. There's a couple of important ones, which are the material settings. So you can choose to either use a standard default material. The standard default material is intended for if you just want to get up and going very quickly. If you just want to actually see your 3D model running inside of Defold, then just use the standard material, because then you won't have any hassles with shaders or parameters of materials and those sorts of things. It should just work. I've got a very limited PBR material shader, and this is for a little bit more capability. So you can expand, sync across data like metallics and roughness and emissive, and we'll have a very quick look at that in a sec. The other very important, there's about 3 important ones we've got to run through here. The other important one is the project folder target. Where would you like to send the default target to? So try to choose a folder with a project. You can actually export to any folder, but these are actually intended to be used at the very top level of a project folder. That will probably change in the future. We'll probably make it a little bit more flexible so people can actually, put target 3D models wherever they like. But at the moment, it's all at the top level. So we hit accept, we give it a name. It's currently set to F18. And if you've got an animation, you need to select the armature. So you can simply click on that and click on the armature, and away you go. So then we hit sync scene, and it should just quickly do that, which is nice and fast. And you jump into this scene now. I'd already actually imported this, so I'll just make sure so everybody can see what's actually going on. We'll delete it. So this is the default test project I've got. There's actually a sample one inside of the repo. So if you want to actually try out and test this, it's very easy to just check out the Git, have a look inside of that folder, fire up that project, do an export to that project. And I've got a couple of little simple things like an orbit camera and whatnot that you can actually have a look directly. We'll have a look at that right now. So if we sync the tool again, right, so now we've actually generated a brand new F18. If we click in here, oh, do not tell me. Have I chosen the wrong folder? Uh-oh. As luck would always have it. Yes, I've chosen the wrong folder. Sorry about this. I'll no presentation default scene. Okay, let's do that again. Sync scene. Right. Yay. Sorry about that. So what you'll end up with is a folder with animation, game objects, images, materials, meshes, and scripts. Scripts are an interesting one we'll talk about in a sec. If you double click on the collection is like a high level standard collection like Defold has. I've used collection to actually map one-to-one to a collection up here. So always try to save everything within a collection. You can rename that collection and the name will get properly renamed on the other side. The aim is to actually segment if you're doing much larger scenes and you want to be able to control the different types of output you've got for a 3D scene. It's really good to separate it by collections. So if we go back to our scene, now you'll notice there's something weird about this little airplane. It's actually got a collider built into it. So they're not completely fully supported yet, but this is all coming. You'll be able to use colliders and all sorts of different things. So we'll just get rid of the collider for the time being. So the easiest way. I should note that all of the structure for what you see in Blender gets mapped directly out into Defold's hierarchy. Now, this is not an ideal way to manage game objects because quite often you can generate a large number of game objects in a game object tree. And because of that, you may end up with a lot more objects in Defold, which performance-wise can be detrimental because you might actually be running lots of different elements. There will be ways down the track to add scripts and whatnot where you can optimize those sorts of things. This is initially, the intent of this particular tool is to jump into Defold very quickly with very, easy to export scenes. That's the primary goal. So now you'll see on the properties, we've actually got everything. There's always something you have to do when you import at the moment because there's another feature I'm currently working on, and that is multiple animation support. Currently, it only supports a single animation, and that single animation is always called scene. So once the multi-animation support comes through, you'll actually have the whole list of all the different animations that you would save from Blender in here. So we've now basically got our little jet to test the actual animation. You can just put it into perspective mode, it looks a little bit better. To test the animation, as I said, I've actually got some simple script where you can make sure that the object is set, the animation is correctly set, and you just run it and you'll be able to test the animation. So let's run this. Now hang on a tick. Is that on the right screen? Okay, good. little bit dark, but yeah, the lighting I really need to do some work on. But so if we actually press G, you can actually see the animation running in default. It's very simplistic, this particular animation anyway. So that's the primary reason why all of this occurred. I really wanted to try and get the F18 into my F18 game nice and easily, minimize the hurt and the pain of handling two processes. Essentially, you're handling one process of exporting from Blender and another process of importing into Defold. And it's, from my perspective, if you can reduce the friction between doing those sorts of things, you can actually be a bit more effective about how you get your data up and running inside of your game. So let's do something a little bit more complex and crazy. I've been trialing a number of meshes and assets to try and sort of test the quality of the synchronization tool. And I've decided to actually do some interesting exporting processes. So we'll start with something static, like a Explorer. I'll add links to these meshes. These are all from Sketchfab, so I'll try to make sure the authors get all the credit. This is all for CC licensing. But here's a fairly complex looking mesh. This is fairly unmodified. You can take almost any Sketchfab and make sure you save in GLTF. I've found that the GLTF format, because it matches the PBR style textures that I'm using, you can take almost any GLTF format, drop it into Blender, and then do a sync, and you should get it straight into Defold. This will take a little bit longer because it's a bigger project. We'll make sure that we're targeting the right folder this time because I've been using a couple of different folders. We check the items. We can try a few of the different properties if people. There's no animation on this particular object. It's purely a static object. So this will take hopefully not too long. You should have a little progress bar here. The very last stage is it converting it all to the default file format. So it generates all of the traditional default elements. Let's hope it doesn't take too long. Oh, come on. Some waiting music. Dum 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 dum. Okay, now we're done. So if we pop back into our default here, we should now see a new folder that has been created called Explorer, which is the name of the vehicle. If we double click, so being a more complex object, it also means that there's a lot more work for Defold to actually load up this particular object in the scene. So you'll notice here, this will take a little time to actually load up the collection within Defold. So when you're working with really large, complex scenes, you may want to break that scene up into smaller parts. If you've got, say, a team working on a large scene, you might want to break it up into, 5 or 6 different bits, so that way you're not always importing large volumes of properties and objects. That's one of the sort of the major drawbacks of actually working with something that is literally making a copy from Blender into Defold itself. And this is, to be honest, no real fault of Defold, right? No matter how you look at sort of doing 3D work, as soon as you start breaking an object down into lots of little meshes and lots of little contexts, then those elements are actually going to take time to load in, whether you like or not. This is taking a little bit longer than I expected. So come on, little guy. Yeah, so I probably should have chosen a smaller one.
I'm jumping in here.
Yeah.
So I think we there's probably things we can do on our end in the editor.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never really tested like such a complex thing. So there's bound to be optimizations we can do in the editor for sure. And now that we have developers that will actively be working on the editor, it's to be expected that we'll see speed ups. Hopefully soon. So we'll.
I mean, honestly, having worked in these types of engines, for probably something like 20 years, I've been involved in sort of simulation work as well as gaming and all sorts. And if you do this sort of thing in Unity, you'll get a similar sort of issue occurring. It's not something quite unique to Defold, because you're actually doing such a large structure and such a large complex nature of an object. You will get, because you're bringing it into a tool that needs to try and manage and edit that. So that it's not like I said, I don't class this as a critical default issue. I'm sure there will be ways to improve it and make it better. Things like, I think one of the key elements that could be very valuable is a binary style format that could potentially improve things like mesh buffers and mesh handling, because a lot of these are text type formats, and because of that, you're processing text, and processing text takes a little bit more time performance wise. So there are definitely ways you could actually make a lot of these things improved. And sure, I also try to point out to people that I think Defold is in its infancy stage of this sort of work. I mean, I don't think we should have expectations that say, we've brought in a really lovely model here. I think it's nearly 300,000 polys or something along those lines, and it's got dozens and dozens. If we have a look at the actual tree structure of the object on the side here, you'll see that it's actually just got lots and lots of meshes and lots of different bits and pieces, and they're actually running different types of material passes as well. So like the windscreens actually has an alpha element to it. So you'll have things like extended draw calls and all those sorts of things, because it's doing context changes between the materials. But this is really more about an example of what if, is there a capability of getting these types of things from Blender straight into Defold? And from my perspective, I was only looking at doing very lightweight, very small 3D assets for my F18 game, which is based around, an old school Amiga game where polygons are actually a very small thing. We were talking 100 polygons, 200 polygons. Whereas I decided to actually try out some of the larger, more complex ones, and it turns out it's actually quite capable. That there's a good reason to actually, use this as a much more complicated 3D rendering toolkit. And with minor improvements to the 3D editor, I think there's a lot of value to come in Defold, most definitely. So a couple of the little features of the tool that are currently in and available. One of the nice things I've found that I really enjoy using is I've actually started building my levels and my missions inside of Defold. So this is for my F18 title that I'm sort of mocking up a copy of the old Amiga version of F18 Interceptor, if you know about it. Essentially, all of the points in space you can actually export as an empty node, and those empty nodes can actually contain information. And the information is stored down in custom properties. So you can have a look at the custom properties of some of these objects I've got here. Sorry, I've got to click on the right thing. I've got a missions folder. So in each of the missions, if we go to one of the sortie missions, why aren't you working? This is just my life. There should be custom properties on these, and I don't know why I'm not seeing them. But essentially, you should be able to apply. Have I missed something here? I'm very sorry about this. I tested. Oh, here we go. There's a couple here. There should be more. Down the bottom here, you'll see that there's a description message for the actual mission. So you can put things like text and information about the mission. I think maybe they're all at the mission level. Yes, they are. Okay. So in this particular mission 2 actually has a description, a detection name for an object that it's going to be using in the mission, an intercept object and a threat object. Sorry, a sortie object and a threat object. So I store things like pathing for objects and in initial positioning for objects and those sorts of things in the actual Blender file. So when you actually export this, so if we go and export this one, we should be able to show you exactly what it spits out. Oh, no. Okay, so that's an error. Just not having, yeah, okay. Well, we should be able to actually still see it working. Sorry about this. It's in here somewhere. Here we go. So what it does actually create, so we should have the traditional version of what I've shown you before. So it starts up right angles. We have to go into 3D mode to see it properly. This actually uses a specialized shader, so it all looks dark anyway, so you have to reassign the material for that particular shader. What you end up with is a scripts file, and if you've seen the sample examples of modules, using modules on the Lua on the Defold sites, it's just using a very simple module setup, and in the module setup, well, we use the module setup to assign a bunch of properties, and that's really it. And as Constantine previously mentioned, the wonderful thing about Lua is its tables, and so now you have this really simple way to actually take information out of Blender and put it directly into your scene. And this particular require. You can add that module into any of your scripts, and then all of a sudden you've got access to all of these types of properties. So there's a bunch of other facilities that are coming down the track for this type of work. I currently have cameras and lighting and a number of other bits and pieces that you can already export. But I also intend to be able to export complete render scripts and some other elements so that we can have more complex features like shadows and whatnot. So yeah, I think I've gone over time. Sorry about that. That's basically it. So if you're interested in using the tool, jump onto the forum side of things and just download it. Give me feedback. I'm very interested in actually trying to make sure that this tool is relatively stable. There's been a lot of work done recently on Windows 10 usage. So if you need to jump in and complain about a bug like that one I just saw there, we can get it all sorted. Thank you. And again, appreciate everybody for their conference talks. It's been really fascinating to see what people are doing in Defold. I think there's amazing stuff happening with this toolkit, and I really appreciate what people are sharing. Like the Scene 3D, for instance, is to actually have that as an accessible set of data and projects to actually look at is fabulous. So I really appreciate people doing these sorts of things.
Thank you so much, David. Very interesting to see it in action. Also very impressive how easy it is to go from and I believe you're on the right track, to actually use Blender as like Artyom showed with Houdini. I mean, use those specialized tools to create the data, and then since the formats we use in Defold are open and text-based and easy to work with, it's easy to make these kind of exporters, and I believe that's your demo is another great example of that in action. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. Cheers, no worries. Really appreciate it.
So I think we're moving on to the final section of this mini conference, and that's an open Q&A. So we got some questions in advance. Some of them we've answered during the presentations, but there's a bunch of them left, and maybe Matthias or Alexei caught a few more from the chat. But I'll just jump in, and I first of all like to thank all of the presenters. It's our first time doing something like this, at least for a very long time. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope that this can be a recurring thing where people from the community can get to present and we can share what's happening on our end as well. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to the people in the chat as well. Excellent. So I'll go through some questions that we've received. So Jean Michel, he's asking if the second part of the sprite trimming is in your plan this year. And I think I'd just briefly hand over to Matthias. Maybe you can just share what the second part of the sprite trimming is.
Yeah, well, it's something that I've been playing with a little bit, researching, but I haven't really come to any significant conclusions yet. But hopefully we'll get something in this year. I mean, that's my goal, at least. It's fairly close to something like a good improvement to what we previously have. So I would say yes, although we haven't officially put it in the roadmap. Perhaps we should have it as at least as a stretch goal in our roadmap.
And just to explain, so how are we dealing with the sprites today, and what will be the improvement?
Yeah, how does it work today?
I'm thinking that in an atlas we have rectangular images, right? And they get packed as rectangles, but in the first part of the sprite trimming work that you did, you actually added support for non-rectangular sprites. So
yeah, so even though the first part addresses the issue of sprite overdraw, so we do create a tiny convex hull around your sprite, cutting away the transparent pieces of your sprite. But in terms of the texture, the final texture atlas, that space is still rectangular, so you're still wasting that space on the GPU, so to speak. For the second part, we also aim to use those convex hulls for the sprite, cutting away the transparent pieces of your sprite and packing it even more tightly into a smaller, hopefully smaller texture, so you can save space on the GPU, and also a little bit download size as well. You can potentially fit more into a texture. If your limit is a 4K by 4K texture, you could hopefully fit more stuff into it. That's the goal.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll jump on to the next question. Are we ever going to see the creation of convex shapes in the editor? And for the last 2 years, we've been able to say a firm no, because we haven't had any real editor developers. It's been us, me and Matthias, doing like the bare minimum, and Matthias has been, doing the editor part of the spine integration, migrating things to the extension. But now that we're onboarding Mats and Vlad, they're old Defold team members that will now work full-time on the editor. Their initial focus will be performance in large projects. So probably speed up what we saw David show, and for a big project with very complex collections with a lot of objects, it's currently quite slow to work with. Also, like modifying big tile maps and atlases and tile sets, that's slow. So their focus will be on speeding those things up, and then obviously working on editor extensions in some way or form. but also probably like capabilities in the editor to edit content in a better way. So there's improvements to be made on the tile map editor, for instance, and what Jean-Michel is asking for here, that's probably also a good example of something that might be added to the editor at some point. I'm not sure what the alternative is, if there's external tools that can do this easily. I guess there is, of course. Can we integrate those formats in a better way?
I would also like to say that it's, I mean, those types of features, for instance, drawing a path that the object should follow or something, that's probably not something that you would like to author in a separate tool, but you would like to edit it in your scene because that's where your object lives. But you also mentioned we have more staff that can actually work on editor things, and Vlad is also the main author of the budding feature of the editor scripts, and hopefully we can take it to some new next levels where we can actually add some more tooling, like we saw David's presentation for the Blender sync tool. We would like more ways for us and our users to modify the editor with more tools, both in dialogues, but also it would be great if we could create tools like this, both for creating convex shapes and, as I mentioned, drawing paths for some object to follow, etc. And I think attacking it from that perspective seems like a bigger business case for us, a bigger bang for the buck, because if we can solve that, then we can suddenly get more help from you guys as well to help iterating on it even more. But we can also, of course, have this as a use case for solving that particular task. So that's definitely something that we would like to have. Yes.
Yeah, can I jump in? I really think that's a really good point, and I think there's some very simple low-hanging fruit that Defold could provide very reasonably well. As Matthias says, something like a spline editor for pathing, I think is a really valuable and fairly straightforward. I don't know implementation-wise, but I think from a user perspective, I think there's a lot of value, because that's actually a relatively succinct element of capability that could be provided, and would give a lot of people a lot of expansion into Defold, into doing things that traditionally, like even I know myself, if I'm actually writing a spline file, currently it's a little tricky. You often actually have to play around with different types of scripts to actually get that working nicely, and it'd be wonderful to have that sort of ready to go for those new users that you're trying to bring into Defold.
That's a good point. Thank you. All right, so let's move on. Is there any plans to allow better access to the protobuf and resources for manipulation in editor scripts? So I guess this comes down to perhaps a bit of the work that David is doing and others are doing, generating default objects on the fly using Python scripts, perhaps executed from an editor script. And yeah, we definitely should expand on the editor scripting capabilities, allow a lot more use cases, and allow the Lua code to do a bit more and not restrict it as much. So yes, there's definitely, perhaps not exactly these plans, but we should probably do some polls and see what we have on GitHub and ask for user feedback on how to improve the editor scripting capabilities right now. So yeah, there are plans, but not concrete ones.
I can also mention that as part of the spine as an extension task, I needed to add the protobuf definitions for our structures, or the file formats basically, and also corresponding Python files into our SDK. So if you download the SDK from GitHub, the zip file, you'll also find the protobuf file definitions and also Python files to read and consequently modify those structures, so you can more easily modify those. For instance, if you want to batch read and write or modify your content, for instance, as often is the case if you create larger games with your custom editors on the side, etc. Currently, we don't bundle the SDK because it contains a lot of extra stuff for C++ and building libraries and stuff, but we should be able to extract those parts. Those are quite tiny, and use them in the editor as well, so you can have access to them from the editor scripts. So we should write that down as a way to improve editor scripts as well. But also, I think in terms of editor scripts, I think you'll have different types of access in general. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's kind of important to think of use cases. I want to do this. Can I do it? Or add a feature request for this and that. I will take it. We'll sort them by the thumbs up that you give our tickets.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next question. Do you have any plans regarding game jam cooperations like the ones we did with web monetization and with Yandex Games? So yeah, we do. We nothing announced yet and no date set, but I think it would be awesome, for instance, to run a game jam together with Rive, where one of the requirements is to use Rive animations. They're currently working on textured meshes or raster images, which will put it as a direct competitor to Spine. So I think we could do a game jam together with Rive. I think that would be really fun and get a lot of people to try it. So we don't have the runtime support yet for that, and it's not released in Rive either, but it's been demoed a lot on Twitter, so it's probably going to be released soon in their web runtime, and then we'll try to get it into the Defold extension runtime as well. So that might be one game jam we could do soon, fairly soon, at least first half of the year, hopefully. But no, nothing else. Next question. Will you tell us a bit about Refold and how you help port games to Nintendo Switch? I'm sure next must be PS5. Yeah, so Refold, for those who don't know, so the Defold Foundation is a foundation, as I mentioned in my presentation. It's a separate legal entity. It has no employees. It's just a board. There's five people on the board, me, Matthias, Sarah, Ellen, and Romain. Romain is the representative from King. That's the only remaining influence King has on Defold. That one board member has to be from King. The rest are external people. Ellen is working with Women in Tech. Sarah is working at Spotify, and me and Matthias, we're representing like the Defold development team. But we're working from our own company, so it's a normal Swedish corporation called Refold. So we're part owners there, and our main focus is to work on Defold on behalf of the Defold Foundation. That's our primary business, but we've also helped developers port games, so Defold games, to Nintendo Switch. So we helped Ben James port Trigger Dungeon and Sector 781, and similar things. And that's basically what we've done. So if you have a game that you feel would be a good fit for Nintendo Switch, we can obviously help out. We have some experience now and know a couple of like the best practices how to make the process as smooth as possible. I think we've maybe hinted at this before in previous presentations, but we're working on more console support. And So PlayStation is on the list. Xbox has been harder to find the right person to talk to and to get like a tools and middleware agreement with Microsoft has proven harder than with Sony. So we've focused on Sony for now. We don't have any dates yet, but that it's going to happen. But it's work done on a slow pace because it's not really paid work, but we see that it's important to have more console support in Defold. It attracts new users, and it's really cool to see your game running on a console. So I guess that answered Pavel's question. I hope it did. I follow another question from Pavel here. Do you have any strategic, mainly including economical factors, plans regarding expanding Defold's PR? Yeah, so back in the day when we worked with King, we had like a developer evangelist, Oleg Priduk. He did a great job of promoting Defold at a lot of conferences, and he was active running our YouTube channel and so on. And right now, as you saw in my presentation, it's just been me and Matthias for a long while, and then Alexei joined, and our focus has been on the product, not doing as much PR as we'd like. And also, we'd really like to attend conferences, but the last 2 years have been, as you know, it's all conferences have been canceled and you can't travel in person and blah, blah, blah due to the pandemic. We have attended some online conferences and promote the Defold a bit there. I did a presentation together with Marius at White Nights a while back. And we hope to get back into the PR things, but right now we have no concrete plans to hire someone to create tutorials or videos. But if there is such a person, it's definitely something to consider, because I think it's where we are currently lacking compared to some competitors. We more tutorials, more videos. It's time consuming to create, but it also, it helps promote Defold. So if you know of a person that would be a good fit, then we gladly take the contact details and see what we can do together. Yeah, I guess that answers the question. I'm keeping track on the chat as well. Let's see. Next one. What are your plans regarding collaboration with OP Games? So OP Games, they're one of these like Web3 blockchain game companies, and they made a no strings attached donation to Defold, a very generous one, to the Defold Foundation, and they donated money to Godot, to Defold, and to Phaser. They also have like a game accelerator where you can, if you have a game idea, obviously built for the blockchain, because that's their line of business and their what they're good at, then they can help with funding and so on. But as I said, it was a no strings attached donation, so there's no concrete plan to collaborate in any way. I've joined one of the podcasts together with Paul Gadi, one of the OP Games founders, and it's a very touchy subject, the whole NFTs and blockchain and Web3 and decentralized games and so on. But if I'm to say anything, then I believe that OP Games has a somewhat different angle, and they are working a lot with like open sourcing games in a way that most game developers would never imagine doing. So that's interesting in itself, like open sourcing games and having the community build upon each other's projects. So I think that's exciting, but we have no real plans to collaborate with them. But we're keeping in touch with them, and they're part of the W3C community group for web games, for instance, and there's going to be a workshop on blockchain games, and we have a representative there as well in the community group. Are there any new corporate partners on the horizon? Yeah, we're in active talks with a number of different partners. Due to recent events, some partnership discussions have been put on hold. But yeah, I mean, we're actively seeking more partners. It's a win-win scenario for a partner and for us. But as I mentioned before, we've secured more funding from an existing partner that will keep us going for a long time. So it's still something that is important to the foundation, not because necessarily of like funding needs, but because it gives us visibility and makes Defold an even more attractive game engine if there are a lot of integrations and lots of partnerships. So yeah, it's something we constantly work on. Sorry. Oh, and that's the last question I had, like initially posted on the forum, but we've received a few during this presentation. I'm just gonna. So we got one question: who is working on Defold right now? So just very quickly answer that. It's me, Matthias, and Alexei, and we will within a month have Mats, Johnny, and Vlad also joining. So there will be 6 people working on Defold with various different focus areas. Another question we got is: anyone having a way to add normals to sprites with a directional light? Want to create some simple lighting effects on 2D sprites? Maybe you could answer that, Matthias.
I'm not aware of a good way to do it today. I think you can set extra textures directly from the render script, but still it's probably a little bit awkward doing that in terms of figuring out UV coordinates, etc. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we still have the something about better texture support. For instance, for normal maps in the roadmap, right, Björn? I think we saw something like that.
That is correct. So,
yeah. So I think that's our way forward. And after we discussed how to do it for many years, and we never really gotten around to actually doing anything. But I'm certain that we'll figure this out this year, and I think we have a good approach thought out for it, and we'll share some design thoughts when we get to it further down the road. But currently, I'm not aware of any good normal mapping practices for our sprites. Perhaps our users can help out in the chat or on the forum or Discord.
Yeah, I think the main hurdle now is that we don't really have nice built-in support for having 2 atlases packed in the same way, or and then tie those together so that you can get both into a shader for a sprite or something. But it's in our roadmap, and we have it on GitHub. So we'll probably start the design process at some point this year to get some feedback, like we did with the work Matthias did recently with the frustum culling. So it's good to always get some feedback from the community as well. All right, we got another question. Will there be any way to generate a mesh at runtime that isn't bound to a buffer file? Right now I have to have many buffer files for generated meshes. That's probably something Atsiom knows about as well, and you, Matthias.
Yeah, I think, we haven't really worked around a certain limitation there. You have to create buffer files up front, which is still at the the first vertical slice of the feature, so to speak. So yes, we need to create a buffer. We need to be able to create a buffer on the fly. And I think over the upcoming future, we'll see more ways to add and create and query data files and etc. For instance, like this question mentions creating a buffer resource on the fly. So basically, it will still be a resource, and it will act as a resource. It will just not be on disk, and it will have a unique name, etc. But everything else should just work if we do that. Other ways to improve content pipeline is to, for instance, we had a recent question about how to set the texture, or rather, how do I update the sub-region of a texture? Currently, we can't support it because we don't really know what sub-region to update in terms of the region of a texture for a sprite that's in an atlas. Currently, you can just replace the entire atlas, not just the. And for instance, in that case, you want to be able to get the atlas data, so you can get the UV coordinates for your sprite, so you can change that sub-region of your texture. And I think we'll need more of those helper or more ways to query the data that we have in the game. Of course, we don't want to just cram it in there. We want them to be based on actual use cases, but still, I think we'll see more of those types of helper functions.
Perfect. So we're probably a bit over time, but we can keep going. I have 3 more questions that I picked up from the chat. So one is, have you any plans to extend code editor functionality? So, and the example is function list of current script as separate window and so on. Yeah, so when you edit a script file right now, the outline panel is empty. That would be a perfect place to put all of the functions and geo properties and any other thing that you might highlight and want to browse too quickly, or just to get an overview of a script. It's definitely something I think we should look into fairly soon, now that we have actual editor developers working. It might also tie into some other things. So we want to improve like the Lua, the whole workflow with Lua, like a linter to automatically highlight syntax errors and that sort of thing. So we might need to build a syntax tree, and that data could then go into the outline. We've also related to that been thinking about like, could we add type information to the Lua somehow? And for those who are following Roblox, they have their own Lua version now, Luau or Lua U. So that might be something to experiment with and see if we could like switch out the Lua version. We use LuaJIT just as an experiment to see if it works. So there's definitely going to happen stuff with the code editor and how we work with the Lua code itself.
And just as coming back to the potential power of editor scripts, I think this particular question, listing the functions of the current script in the outline, that's totally something that should be doable by an editor script. And if we implement it as an editor script, then our users can help out modifying it and improving on it later on, etc. For instance, syntax highlighting or all those other things that you mentioned should probably also be possible to do using editor scripts.
That's a good point. Okay, next question. Do you have plans to add more functions for the render, like attack more render targets from gbuffer, other format textures.
Can I also add a bit to this question?
Sure, absolutely.
I know there's been work on Vulkan and Metal support, not recently, but some time ago. Are there also any plans of extending that? Because right now it's an optional opt-in feature, and I don't think many people use it.
Yes, I'm not the expert here, but I mean, we're moving more and more towards more advanced rendering features, exposing more capabilities, more formats, and adding functionality in the default SDK to query for available extensions and so on. So I think that's yeah, we probably need to give more power to the developers when it comes to how we render things, and you know, perhaps the developer should be able to pick more advanced render features and have those available, but then exclude some platforms that don't support it. Maybe I'll let Matthias jump in here. I think you've given this some thought.
I mean, I agree. First off, we are currently actively using the Vulkan backend on Nintendo Switch, and I think we'll also migrate this year for the Darwin platforms, Mac OS and iOS as well, because I think the Vulkan backend has been tested now quite a lot with the Switch version, and OpenGL is deprecated on, you know, Apple devices. As for the feature sets, it's always been, I mean, we're moving from a different paradigm where it had to work on all devices all the time. But as we also saw that our users needed more modern things, we needed to open up to, you know, more modern capabilities, and suddenly we have to, you know, support a wide variety, and then we suddenly don't want to be stuck like with a implementation that doesn't excel at both. And since we know we can't encompass all features and make it work the same way on all platforms, because we still support WebGL 1 and OpenGL ES2 on Android as a fallback, for instance. So we'll definitely open up more checks and capabilities to the user, and it will be a, you know, progressive increment. For instance, I think this sprint, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this sprint we added support for floating point render targets, and that too needs to be checked internally in the engine if the device actually supports it. And I'm not entirely sure how I implemented it, but you should be able to detect it as well as the developer. Like, do I have access to the floating point render target in the render script? Otherwise, if I don't have access to it, then I need to select another type of implementation in the render script. So we don't want to lock you down there. We want to give you the capabilities. But of course, it also puts some more responsibility in the hands of you, the developers. Like, you need to set the lower end bar, you know, what type of devices is the minimum requirement for your games, etc. You need to think about those things more.
Yeah, because previously, as you say, we've made sure that everything works everywhere. But if you want more advanced features, then some devices will not be supported anymore, and some functionality might not exist. And then you as a developer have to make that choice. And I use these features, and then I exclude certain platforms or certain hardware. Or whatever. So we'll give more power to you as a developer, but it will also give you, you have to be more responsible and think about where you draw the line and how you handle platforms that doesn't work. The final question I have caught from the chat is, has anyone been using both Spine and Rive? What are the pros and cons of each tool? So I'm not an expert here, but there are fundamental differences right now. So Spine does skeletal 2D animations with raster images, can do mesh deformations and all kinds of things, but it's always 2D images that you animate in with some kind of bone structure or skeleton. Rive supports, it was initially vector only. So basically what you could do in, I guess, Flash back in the day. But otherwise it has the same features as Spine with skeleton animations and timelines and events and blending and all of those things. And what's exciting now is that Rive is adding support for texture meshes as well. So they will have the same capabilities as Spine. So they will be a direct competitor. But that's in the works and will probably not be available for another few months in Defold. Yeah, do you have anything else to add, Matthias? Yeah, one thing maybe, one advantage with Rive then is that since it also supports vector graphics, it could work really well to create like the UI of a game, a HUD or something. And they are also building, I believe, some kind of layout constraints and things like that. So you could get things to snap to certain points and positions yeah. So it might prove, it might be that Rive is actually going to be able to handle more things than Spine in the future.
Yeah, and I would like to say they're incredibly focused on games, and they really want to, make sure that they create a product that is useful for both you, the users, and also the game engines, that that it performs well. So we're in constant discussion with them and monitor their progress in terms of their Rive app, what you can do online in their tool, and also with the C++ backend that they have. And soon enough, we should be able to implement their mesh deformation. And that's going to be another big milestone. Of course, we do know that our current implementation of the Rive extension with the vector implementation is lacking performance due to a lot of draw calls, because it's a lot of stencil draw calls, unique draw calls. And we're working closely with them to figure out how to improve that. But also, one of the main focuses is to come even closer to being the direct competitor to Spine with rasterized textures and animations.
We got another Rive-related question from Niklas. He's asking, is there a timeline for when anti-aliasing ingredients will work well in Rive? So anti-aliasing, yeah, we know there is none right now. But we will. We had a meeting with the Rive guys yesterday, and they've hired more people, and they're expanding and growing their team. And they now have one guy that will work like fully focus on, as Matthias said, on games and on the rendering to make it on par with what you get from Spine. So anti-aliasing is one of the things that will definitely come at some point. I can't say when, but I know for a fact that everyone has identified it as something that's missing. So it's just a matter of priorities and when it will actually be implemented. I can't say for sure, but we know that it's needed, and Rive knows that it's needed. So that's all of the questions I have. Did you catch any other questions earlier on during the conference, Matthias or Alexei?
No, I think you got them all.
Perfect. Like Pokemon.
Yeah. And as always, reach out to us on Forum or Discord.
Exactly. Yeah, this stream will, of course, it's going to be available to watch on YouTube later on, and we will just post some comments, a follow up to our forum, and I'll try to make a summary of the questions we got. And if you have any more questions, things that pop up after this conference and after the talks, then please post them there, and we'll make sure to answer or forward them to the presenters. So thank you so much, guys. It's been great. We will repeat this. Thank you for your patience with us Zoom newbies. I hope it worked relatively well. And thank you again to all of the people presenting. Super great to hear about all of the exciting projects being worked on. So thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Great talks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
This was
Bye.
great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Mhm.